Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wellness and Legacy Group Mastermind Weekly Call. Today, you're actually going to be getting the good information about probate real estate from Holly Schledhauer and Carolynn Castillo. We're turning the tables today, and I am getting interviewed. Okay, so this is going to be fun. Before we get started, let's go ahead and for anybody that's brand new here, we represent the Wellness and Legacy Group. We are passionate about connecting death care professionals. We meet locally here in Ponte Vedra. So if you are in our local area, we'd love to have you out to one of our networking groups. We do get together once a month. If this is your first time, you're probably saying, what on earth is the death care industry? Well, we've just actually celebrated our 1 year anniversary. And in the process, we have curated what the death care industry is. Today, you're going to hear me talk about probate real estate. This is where I started on the journey. And as I realized, I started looking to my left and started looking to my right, I started realizing that there was all these other professionals that were working with my same customer at the same time I was working with them. However, we were not in communication and we didn't really know each other. So as our group got together, we realized that if you're going to talk about post a minute, after somebody dies, right? Then naturally you become a pre-component for pre-planning. So how do you plan well so that you don't end up in probate and that your loved ones do have a good, an easier transition when you pass away? And then naturally that rolled into end of life senior care. So when you're actually aging and you're at that point where all of your plans are going into action, and then of course then you pass away. So it's basically we've identified this circle of life, if you will, and all the professionals that are entangled in it and serve, and we are uniting as an industry to really break it down. This has been our mission and our vision since day one, and I'm so glad to see that it's still standing true 1 year later. Our vision is to create a seamless connection between the wellness industry, which serves individuals prior to death, and the legacy industry, which supports individuals and families post death. What we recognize is that both sectors often serve the same customers, sometimes simultaneously, and our group aims to foster a deeper understanding and a collaboration across these critical stages of service and ultimately unite our industry together. So we launched this mastermind of industry professionals. You can check us out on YouTube or even our website, and we have literally completed, I believe now, 18 interviews of death care professionals. So it's quite amazing. And we're getting really dangerous as professionals, learning the ins and the outs of what we are calling the death care industry. And today you get to hear about what I do, how I got into probate real estate, what probate real estate is. Let me go ahead and unshare my screen. And the fun part is that the amazing Holly, if no one's met her, if you're not local, if you're local, you know Holly. If you're not local, you don't know Holly. Okay. And she joined me on this journey of Probate Property Angels, serving families after they pass away to sell their properties. And today she gets to be the maestro, okay, and interviewing the one and only Carolynn Castillo.
I am so flattered. I'm honored to do this for you.
Yay!
All right.
Let's go ahead and jump in, Holly.
All right. We'll just start from the top. So, we were talking before, what really did inspire you to get into probate real estate? Because I
Yes.
think that, our background and stories in this is really an important factor when getting to know what we do and how we do it.
The people behind the mission, yes.
Hmm.
So I've actually was a traditional realtor since I was 18 years old. A lot of people don't know that. It's only been a few years.
A
And
few years.
I was introduced to real estate when I was literally 16, 17 years old. And when I had the opportunity to go ahead and take my license, I was 18. And so it was pretty exciting. I did traditional real estate for a long time, just helping buyers and sellers upgrade, downgrade, things like that. And I actually had my first opportunity to work with a family that was in probate. I never even knew what probate was. I never heard the term at all.
Right.
Okay.
So what is probate, right? That'll be our next question because I don't think a lot of people know.
People don't even realize,
Yeah.
right? And then if they know probate, they think about it in the law. They don't think
Mhm.
about it connected with real estate,
Yeah.
right? So I get this family that contacts me. It was a referral, and they were like, "Oh, I need help selling my dad's house." And I was like, "Perfect. I'll go meet you at the house." That's traditionally what you do, right?
Hmm.
And she was like, "No, no, no, I can't meet you there." She's like, "I'll just come to your office." So I was like, okay, that was like the first red flag. Like, this is kind of weird.
Hmm.
So then she came to my office and she basically explained that her 90-year-old father had like a 30-year-old girlfriend. And when he passed away, she lock and keyed the house and would not let the family come in. She had liquidated most of his accounts. Okay. She had already convinced him to like put her name as beneficiaries on things. So this was literally the only asset from his estate that the family was truly entitled to, but
Hmm.
they couldn't access it because of this girl, right? And so this lands on my desk, okay, and everybody knows I'm down for a good time. So I decided to go over there, and I was able to speak with her, help her explain the situation, get her moved out of the property. We went in, got the house restored, got it on the market, got it sold. And I just honestly, as crazy as the deal was, I fell in love with it. I have a passion for people don't know this, but I do a lot of ministry work. I've done a lot of volunteer work. Like, say, what do you want to do in your free time? Or you go to the homeless shelter, like that's just who Carolyn is at the core, And when I got the opportunity to help this family in a more intimate way, a more like vulnerable,
Hmm.
whereas traditional real estate, it's just about the good stuff, like, yay, let's get a bigger house, a prettier house,
Right.
you know. But when you get into probate real estate, you're really working in inner family dynamics, maybe stuff that's not so pretty, maybe stuff that's not so easy. And that was my first experience with it. And I was like, wow, I really enjoyed this. The family to this day, still sends me messages on Facebook like, we'll never forget what you did for our family. Because had I not stepped in and
Hmm.
really got in the field with them, they would have lost everything. They would have never gotten anything. And sometimes for these families it's more about just justice and just getting what's rightfully theirs, and not feeling like something got stolen from them. So but then it was like, where do I find more of these? I don't even know what probate is. And then that's when I started researching and realizing, oh wow, probate is something that happens when somebody passes away, and the real estate has to go through a court process, all the things. So it was kind of like my first taste of it. And then that just started a whole journey for me afterwards.
Yeah. Wow. It's those good stories. But
Yeah.
so if we're going to break down what probate is, right? There's a different process involved. So what is probate and how can we explain it to somebody if they've never heard of it?
Yeah. So probate by itself is the legal process of transferring a deceased person's asset
Mhm.
to their heirs. That's what probate is. And a lot of people don't know this. Probate is the same nationwide, worldwide. That was one thing that I didn't know either. I thought, is this just a Florida thing? Is this just how Florida handles it? No. probate is, this is the way that we administer a deceased person's assets. So think about anything that has like a title, a beneficiary, like cars, houses, stocks, 401ks, like anything that you own in your name that then when you die has to be transferred over into your heirs' names. That's probate.
Mhm.
Um,
So
so
then, given that there's a legal process, are there steps involved that differ from just a regular run-of-the-mill transaction in real estate?
a lot.
Okay, touch on that.
Yeah, big time. So, I mean, think about just a regular real estate transaction. It's literally all about just selling the house, right? So,
Mhm.
you're talking most all my years in traditional real estate when I would go for a listing appointment, they've got like the what is it? The incense brewing, they've got the candles lit, like you're walking into like this beautiful home because they say, well, I want it to be perfect when the realtor comes here so she can say it's worth so much money.
Right.
Right? Like you're showing up and you're just basically, you're there to market, you're there to advise, and it's a short process. Most sales processes between listing a property and selling a property is what, 30 to 60 days,
Mhm.
But when you talk about someone's inheriting a property through probate, it's the complete opposite, right?
Mhm.
You're walking into sometimes chaos, right? So
Yeah.
typically we don't know when somebody's going to die, right? And if we are on the cusp of death, right? What's the last thing you're thinking about?
Mhm.
Selling your house.
Right.
You're not thinking about selling your house. You're not thinking about, oh, the dirty dishes in the sink and the laundry over here and what my heirs are going to have to do when I'm gone. You're not thinking about that. Everybody is focused on the individual, grieving. It's usually an emotional process, right? Then the person passes away, and the family is immediately hit with boom, all this responsibility. Oh crap, what are we going to do with dad's house? And, how are we going to handle the funeral? And what are we going to do with this, right? Also, something to mention about probate specifically is that if you do pre planning and you set up a trust,
Mhm.
right? People say, well, my family has a trust set up, right? So if you have a trust set up, it's a little bit easier for the family to navigate. Doesn't make it less emotional or challenging. It just the pathway has already been laid out for you. So typically people that have a trust in place, they have pre-planning funeral arrangements. They've already put in their trust, when I die, I want my property to be transferred into my heirs' names. They've already set all that stuff out. But for families that don't pre plan and you just die, there is a court administered process that you have to follow, right? So, families don't know how to process it. I mean, most people, personally, me, I've never been through a probate case in my own family. I've never been a personal representative. I've never been nothing in my family, right? To go through probate. Now, I've been through hundreds of probate transactions for my clients, but typically people only go through probate once or twice a lifetime. So when you're having to navigate something so complex and you have no experience with it and you don't know what you don't know, right? So that's where it becomes a very challenging time for the family.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, it does become an emotional component, and it's often fueled by emotion and overwhelm, right? That crisis moment, and you're faced with all those decisions. But
Mhm.
when somebody does inherit a property, what would be the first steps that they should take in order to mitigate some of this chaos that they're feeling?
Mhm. Well, there's a lot of dynamics, Holly. Every family is different. I'll be a lawyer now. It depends.
It
Uh,
all depends.
yeah, there's a lot of family dynamics, right? So if you talk about a family that maybe you're the only heir, maybe you didn't have any brothers or sisters, and maybe you live locally in Florida, maybe you live down the street, right? It becomes more manageable, right? You're the only decision maker. you're in close proximity to the property, right? You have local resources and local help, right? There's a joke in Florida, they call it heaven's waiting room. Okay, what? Because people come here to die, right? So they live in New York, they live in Chicago, they live in different parts of the country. What is everyone's dream? To retire in Florida.
Florida. That's right.
So the rest of your family is still wherever they are and they come to visit you, then all the things. But in the event that you pass away, or we should say when you pass away, right? Your family could be, it's a totally different circumstance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't live in Florida, if you don't have any resources, just think about it, right? When people pass away, we don't know when it's going to happen. It just hits you like a ton of bricks, right? You have your career, you have your kids, you have, your responsibilities. Now all of a sudden, you've got to deal with all of these very important issues. Talk a little bit about the real estate portion of it, specifically. What I tell families is as soon as you know that this is the case, right? Your loved one passes away, you're local, you're not local, either way, okay? You're gonna come down typically for the funeral. You're gonna be here at some point. The first thing is securing the property.
Mm-hmm.
You may think that, you may not even have it on your radar, okay? The first thing I do when I get a property that I'm helping a family is I secure it. I make sure all the windows and doors are secure. What happens in probate is this is subject for criminals. They know it's a public notice. So everybody's put on notice that wants to be made aware that this is a public notice. So you do have people that prey on these situations, look for vacant properties, look for overgrown grass, and then they'll go snoop around. So
Mm-hmm.
I had a family one time that they told me that the neighbor was looking after the house and ended up finding out that there was a homeless person or a squatter type of person, that was going in the house at the nighttime, okay, eating the food, drinking the liquor, nice and warm and cozy in, their loved one's bed. They never noticed it because the guy only came in and out in the nighttime,
Mm-hmm.
and the neighbor wasn't going over there walking inside the house. And then next thing you know, when they ended up finding out was that the car disappeared. So they had gotten into the house, I guess, as they got comfy cozy, they were rummaging through the stuff, found the keys, got the car, and took off. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So, and that was where the neighbor was watching the
Mhm.
house. So I always tell people, your neighbor, yeah, can keep an eye, but they're not, locking it. So I always recommend securing it, maybe even changing locks, making sure that there's no entry points in the home. Also securing any type of water, like shutting water off, like not, because think about it, this is a vacant home now. You're not there, you're not going to see when something happens. um Another fun fact that a lot of people don't know is that your insurance policy, the deceased person's homeowner's insurance policy, is pretty much null and void.
Mhm.
So if you want to make sure that that property is insured, you have to take out your own policy. When, in God forbid, there were to be something to occur, and you try to run it through the insurance, they're not gonna approve it because they said it's a vacant home, it's not being supervised, we're not gonna be responsible, right?
Yeah.
So really, really getting to the house, securing the property, securing, making sure, water, air conditionings, nothing's going to be leaking, because think about it. You go back to New York, who's checking in on the house, who's looking in on the property, right?
Right.
Unlike a 401k that you're inheriting or, a piece of jewelry that you're inheriting, real estate has, air conditioning, water, the grass grows, the pool needs to be cleaned. This is a living, breathing asset. And if it's not taken care of, if it's not maintained, it can depreciate in value pretty quickly based on, not having that, that attention that a house needs. you know?
Right, which are some of the challenges that these people now face are like you said, it's a living, breathing machine that has to be cared for, which is, something that we at Probate Property Angels, right? We take care of that for people.
Mhm.
Can you touch on those little things, right? We can secure and do all the little things, but what
Mhm.
else
Yeah.
might be a
So what,
consideration?
yeah, what really starts to happen is, first of all, in Florida, so you have, we had Chris Letty on here talking about, what the probate timelines are, what the probate process is, right?
Mhm,
So one of the first things is the family has to agree, right? So if the family is in disarray with each other, or they're at odds with each other on how to handle things,
mhm,
that can be a big problem, right? Because in Florida, in order to sell a primary residence of the decedent, all beneficiaries have to get along. All beneficiaries have to agree to move forward and sell that property. So if one sister wants to do it and the other sister wants to do it, not going to happen. Okay. Now, here we do offer mediation, and I've mediated a lot of families, like just that first story that I showed you, like the lady was lock and key. She was not letting the family in. And think about the dynamics. Like, girlfriend that has stolen all of dad's money and then daughter of the deceased, right? What do you think? I mean, it's some hot waters there, right?
mhm,
So the job of a mediator, a third party, right, can come in and be neutral, right? We
yeah,
can be neutral. We can hear one side out, we can hear the other side out, and help the family walk together to where it needs to be. So one of those first things that we do is we do a phone consultation to really identify what the needs are of the family. So we
mhm,
say how many heirs are involved, is everybody getting along? Everybody agrees except that guy, so then we'll come up with a plan of how to reach out to him, how to speak to him, help him to understand that one person cannot negate the whole family from moving forward. Okay. And that's the important thing to know. They can sure slow the process down, but there is legal actions that can be taken to push somebody to legally require them to move forward. Okay. We first take the first approach is just speaking with them and bringing them on board and helping them to understand the process. Honestly, Holly, that's what I find most of the times is just
mhm,
lack of communication. Big brother telling little sister something and little sister saying, the heck you are, I'm not doing anything you say,
right,
But then when I come in and I talk to them, they're more like, okay, yeah, all right, that makes sense. Yeah, just they haven't
mhm,
been communicating, they haven't been sharing anything with me, and a lot of times it can be very easily, smoothed out.
mhm,
And so you have in Florida, let's say everybody agrees. Okay, yes, everybody agrees we're going to sell dad's house. Nobody's moving into it. Well, that's perfect and dandy. But now we also have a court process that we have to adhere to. So, like a traditional sale, you want to sell your house? Go for it. You don't need any court approval, you don't need anything. But if you're going to sell a house in probate, you need to get the court authorization. So we will have to petition the court to request the sale, or you wait after the 90-day creditor period that Florida has, the 90-day creditor period where anybody that owes the estate money or anything like that can come forward, one or the other. So a lot of families that work with us, it's because they don't want to wait the 90 days. They want to go ahead and move forward with the sale, um, because the house, like we already kind of discussed, is like a liability. As
yeah,
much as it's an asset and as much as it's like, woohoo, we're gonna get 600 grand when we sell dad's house, great, but real estate money, you got to get it out of these walls. It's not a bank account that you could just go cash in. What we're seeing right now in Florida is the market's going down. Property values are going down. So
right,
guess what? Your dad died in January. Guess what? Sorry to tell you, the house is not worth as much as it was in January, right? So it's a very unsecured asset in the sense that it can get damaged, right? It can have a flood, the air conditioning can break, you know, somebody can vandalize it. The market could go down. You know, there's so many things that can come against that type of asset. Whereas like a 401k, I guess technically, yes, the stock market can go down, right? But it doesn't require anything on the exterior to uphold it. What if somebody passes away and they have a mortgage on it? What if they have a reverse mortgage on it? Every month that goes by, the mortgage is going up. So every month that you hold that property, basically you're having the payoff is getting higher and higher every month. So what most families realize is that the house is we need to it's better to liquidate it, cash it out, you know, put it for sale as soon as possible, remove get that money secured into your state bank account or your lawyer's escrow account, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the funds are secure. You don't have to worry about the house, the utility bills, the pool, the landscaping, all the things, you know. So you know, that's really, you know, the process as far as like how is it different from a traditional is everybody has to agree,
Mm-hmm.
and there is a court administered process that we have to follow,
Right.
right? Um, I could jump into a whole nother thing unless you want to jump into a question. But another thing is let's
Yeah.
talk about preparing the house,
Yeah.
right? Like we
Yeah.
said, it's
Right.
not
When somebody's out of state and not here, what are they gonna do?
right. And it's again, think about it. If you're a traditional home seller, typically you're packing up your stuff and you're moving to
Mm-hmm.
another house. Easy peasy,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when somebody passes away, you know, there's only so much that you're going to take from that house. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to take everything. You know, most families already have their own houses, their own stuff, you know, all the things. So, how do you conquer that, you know? So for us, we do it in pretty much like a three-step process, which is one, we ask the family to remove all the personal belongings that they want. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't believe, Holly, but this is actually a pretty difficult process for families. You
Yeah.
know, I was just talking with an executor this morning, and it's her and her sister cleaning out their dad's house. And she said, it's just been so hard for me and my sister to clean out the house. We had to ask for family members to come in and just help us, like, take out like the memorabilia stuff, because she's like, every time we try to start doing it, we're just crying and we're just very
Yeah.
ineffective, you know? So I
Yeah.
was
You
like,
have to, yeah, you have to think about all of this stuff, the small stuff to get to the big stuff. And all of it is probably really layered with emotion. And,
yeah,
you know, you pull out something and that just triggers. So you almost have to come at it from like just a really objective point of view and take the emotion out of it.
yes, and that's by hiring us, that's what we do for them,
Hmm.
right? Because people can get stuck in that process, right? They may all want to sell, everybody wants to sell, nobody's keeping the house, but then they go over to the house and to try to go through everything, it's an emotional roller coaster. And then if you have multiple people involved, you know, can everybody come at the same time? And no, you know, Johnny hasn't come yet, and this person's coming from North Dakota, and you know, you want to give everybody their time, but what can happen is that can just it can just go on and on and on. At the same process, what's also happening? You're paying the utility bills, the mortgage, you know, the vacant you know,
Yeah.
all these things are lingering with that process. So you know, if you need, you know, like for doing it with us, is we help you with it. So we've literally packed people's houses, you know. We have an amazing company here that will literally pack up the stuff you want, you know,
Hmm.
go on FaceTime with executors and say, you know, what is it that you want? I mean, I've worked on estates, Holly, where people don't want nothing, you know, where sons and dad was estranged, they didn't talk for over 10 years, and he didn't come for the funeral, you know, and he was just like, you know, we couldn't even take it, like we had to like save some of his like baseball pictures that were on the, you know, like we literally packed him a box that he didn't ask for. and shipped it to him because we just like, gosh, like his dad, even though he had those feelings towards his dad obviously had lots of stuff about him and obviously cherished his son for whatever happened, we don't know. But these are kind of those like sticky family dynamics that can really get in the way of things.
Mhm.
But the first stage of it, whether you get friends and family to do it, whether you hire us or whether you do it yourself, is removing those personal belongings, removing those keepsakes that you want to have. Depending on what's in the house, then from there, we typically like to stage it. If the house is in good order, stage the house just like as if grandma was still here. You know, one of my first cases that I had, those ones stick with you, is it was two sons. They were like 19 and 20, and I could just feel it like if it was my boys. Like that's how I felt,
Yeah.
when I was sitting at the table with them. And, their mom went to the hospital just for a stomach ache. Like
Mhm.
she felt something, and she was like, let me go to the hospital. She never came back. Mom never came
Ah,
back, right? So there's dishes in the sink, there's laundry. Like this lady just ran out. Like think about your house right now. Like I always joke around and say, if I died, someone have to come home and do my laundry. Like that's where we are coming in to restore the dignity back to the house. If you're going to sell your house right now, if I was going to sell my house, I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to put little things around. I'm going to put my touch on it. But when you're working with an inherited property, who's doing that?
right.
Right? So, removing the personal stuff, staging the house so it looks presentable for the market, and then, doing maybe an estate sale or just a clean out, at that point, depending on what's there and what's of value, those kind of things. But the contents of the home is a huge part of it,
Mhm.
with probate that you don't deal with in regular real estate. So when you work with someone like ourselves, this can save you like, oof, I mean, this will take family months to accomplish sometimes. And from us, from beginning to end, you're talking less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I always say in probate, time is money. The quicker you get out of probate, the better off you're going to be. The longer that it drags out is the more expensive that it gets, and you open yourself up to liabilities and things to go wrong.
Yeah, which is exactly what we were talking about, is working with an agent who really does know the probate process because it is vastly different than a traditional, transaction. There are lots of little things that I think if you don't have the experience within probate can lead to compounding problems. Like you have enough to worry about.
Mm,
If the agent isn't schooled in this, it could lead to even more problems. So,
right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
An agent that doesn't have probate training has no idea.
mhm.
Like
No,
literally, like I said, my first time getting into probate, I was like, what is this? There's so many moving parts. And also with the laws on who has to sign at closing, the court documents, because, speaking with Chris Letty on our previous interview, he'll say, yeah, he'll get a court document from the judge that's like, yes, authorization to sell. Then you show up at the title company, and the title company says, this is a no go. You got to go back to the judge and get them to redo the paperwork. A realtor that doesn't have, they'll be so lost. They have no capacity, of what that takes, to get those approvals in. So
yeah. It's like
you're,
an orchestra. You're like the maestro, and the symphony. You're
yeah,
conducting all of these parts. And
yeah. And
so,
I mean, most realtors do, right? I mean,
well, this is layered.
yeah, even a regular realtor, I mean, you're doing a lot of moving parts. I think a lot of times people don't realize how much realtors actually do. They think, "Oh yeah, they just make loads of money and they're like Instagram stars." But there's a lot that goes into it. There really truly is. And then when you layer the component of Like, just think about the one factor. I have a case right now, a family that I'm helping, 23,
That is
23,
so many.
23.
That is
So
that is a huge orchestra. I mean, like, what?
normally you'd have a husband and a wife selling a house.
Right.
Imagine having 23 sellers. Like,
No,
okay,
that's
so
mind-boggling. I don't think that people really can grasp that because that touch on that, like how many signatures and people and agreements, right? Like it is vast.
it's unbelievable, and everyone has to sign at these closings.
And
So
what happens if one of them didn't sign, right? So
you're
what would
not going to
happen?
close. You can't close. You see, it's very intricate, when you're dealing with just a husband and wife selling a house, that's the end of it. Does your husband want to sell the house? Yeah, he
Right.
wants to sell the house. Okay, cool. Both of you guys show up, you sell your house. But, when we're doing this, you've got sellers all over the country, right? You either just the notaries, getting everybody, in alignment for the closing, there's a lot of moving parts. And like I said, the more time that goes on, you know how many families I've been working with, and somebody, a beneficiary of the estate, passes away,
Oh,
right?
oh,
It happens now. Well, guess what? Now that guy needs a probate. Probate's for everyone. What happens when there's a missing heir, right? Where think nobody thinks about this stuff until you have to think about it. If you have a brother or sister that you haven't talked to in 10 years, they're 18 years old, they left the house and they made their own life. Well, if mom or dad passes away, you're not the only heir. Your sister that
mhm.
took out of town 20 years ago is now entitled to half of this property, and you can't do anything until you get her involved in it, right? So you're talking about, private investigators trying to figure out where they are. I've had a case where the girl was completely gone, I think for 7 years. They had made multiple attempts to contact her. There was no like banking transactions. She owned a house. I think it was in Colorado. She owned a house in Colorado, was paid off. Nothing, nothing. Nobody heard from her, nothing. And in Colorado, they had to get a presumption of death certificate for her. And then they
Really?
use that presumption of death here in Florida to say this person is believed to be deceased, and then that's how they were able to remove her from, needing the title work and to be able to close on the house, you know?
Wow. That would be a big challenge.
Yeah.
So, so any other challenges
A
that
lot of
you
challenges.
see? Uh-huh. So what other kind of challenges do people face when selling their inherited properties? I mean, we've touched on quite a few, but
Yeah. You know, getting access to be able to speak to the banks, things like that, getting their letters of administration,
so
you know.
let's go back for just a second. So when somebody is going to inherit a property, right? Who is the who or what can they do? Like, what do you think is the very first thing? I know we kind of touched on it, but like, really, who do they call?
Hmm.
Do they
Well,
call the attorney? Do they call the bank? And then how do they navigate all of that? I mean,
yeah, yeah, we've pretty much kind of uncovered that in some of our interviews that we've done, right? And I think that from what I've heard is I feel like the first thing people do is go to like a bank.
mhm.
They first go to a bank and then they get to the bank and then the bank's like, "Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry, you're not on this, right? You're not on the account. You're not listed as a beneficiary." And I feel like that's the first like place that they usually end up going and then finding out, oh wow, I have to go through probate. And then from there, if they have someone that's referring them a probate attorney, or simply a lot of times these people are just Googling for a probate attorney and they're hiring somebody to then open up a probate case so that they can do what they have to do, you know?
So then if somebody is going to, they know their family member is going to die, pass
Hmm.
away. They know that they're going to be inheriting something.
Hmm.
What can be done in order to just further the process along quickly and just have things ready to sell and go?
In regards to the real estate, in Florida we have the ladybird deed,
Hmm.
so that is like the easiest thing, if somebody's in hospice and, it's their and they're eminent, that this is gonna happen,
Right.
then it would make perfect sense to just sign the deed over, so that the family wouldn't have to go through probate.
Yeah, doing the Lady
Um,
Bird deed.
mhm.
Yeah,
But if they, a lot of times, Holly, people aren't thinking about it.
they're not. I know.
They're not thinking about business stuff in those moments. They're just like freaking out that their loved one is about to pass away, and then that's what I'm saying. Like that's how like the work got my heart,
Hmm.
because it's easy. Like, yes, being like, a beautiful, rich, and the famous realtor is a lot of fun. I'm not gonna lie. Okay. But for me, like, it got to the point where it was just almost became a little bit unfulfilling, you know,
Hmm.
where the money is great and everything is all good. But it's just like, and I was, most of my career is in South Florida. Okay. So everybody's always up in the ante. Okay. Like everybody's selling every 5 years. You know what I mean? And so I was the queen of simultaneous transactions where you would sell your house with me and then in the same transaction I'll help you buy one. I always like the pressure, Don't give me the easy work because I don't want it. But but then that's how I started, like, kind of just getting numb to it a little bit. And then like I said, when I got into probate, I was like, man, these people like really need help,
Yeah. They
and
need
this
that
is like,
helping hand, right? They
yeah,
need that person to just help them cross the threshold.
yes, this is really, and really all the members in our group, like all the interviews we've conducted and all the people
So
we've
much.
we all have that same component.
Yeah.
Think about the social worker that is in hospice, like I met with him not too long ago and it was like, oh my gosh, like how do you do this? Like you're the one like holding the person's hand, like
Yeah.
helping them cross over. Like that is not work that is like you're doing it for the money,
Mhm.
you're in it for this, high power career. This is soul work.
Yeah.
This is meaningful work, and even though you may not get, all the accolades and look like, all these things, to me that's like impactful. You're changing lives, as you're doing the work,
Yeah.
and that's what I feel like every day, every family that God gives me the opportunity to work with. That's how I see it. I say, if this was my family, how would I do it? How would I handle it? And the funny thing is that's how I learned it all. Like
Yeah.
I was never, originally when I started formally trained, I said, "Oh, I want to get into probate real estate," and formally train myself. I trained myself by working family after family, family after family, and you start to notice that they all have these similar
Yeah.
components after you do so many of them. And then we've developed, I mean, beautiful streamlined processes to really overcome all these things, so that the family can get through it quicker, they can get through it easier, and not have to, as like we always say, your inheritance should be a blessing,
Yeah.
but it quickly turns into a burden. Some people, they don't meet somebody like me, and they can't sell the house for a year. They end up broke because they've invested their own money into keeping up the house. That's one thing I will tell you in my experience of seeing families go through this is they get a like an opportunity sparkle in their eye
Mhm.
of like, oh, this is grandma's house. Like we can invest some money into it and we can fix it up and we can do all these things. And it normally doesn't go too well.
No.
you
Yeah.
know and so I always tell people, do not invest your own money in this. There's no obligation by the law that you have to continue someone's mortgage or you have to continue somebody's bills after they pass away. There is no obligation for that whatsoever. Okay. If somebody doesn't have their account set up on auto pay through the bank, that bank account is cut off from you. You're not going to have access to that bank account until you go through the probate process. So then how do you pay for things?
Right. Right. How do you? That's a
So
big quandary.
people start digging into their own pockets, you know? And I mean, I've seen executors pay upwards to $50,000 keeping up an estate because they don't want it to be past due or they don't want this or that. And everybody does it with a good heart, with good intentions, but then not really realizing how long things are going to take and how it's all going to really add up quickly, you
Mhm.
know? So, I always advise like do not put in your own money. It's better to, even if upfront it looks like maybe you're taking a little bit of a hit on the front end,
Right.
by maybe like if everybody's on the market for a certain price and you offer yours at a better price so that you can get that quick sale, would be in your best interest than to be holding a piece of real estate for 6 months trying to sell it at the top of the market, right? Um, I should share that story I had of the guy that we had a cash offer the first, like literally 2 weeks into putting it out there. He was like, no, 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 right? Okay, fine. So he's paying for the mortgage out of his pocket the whole time. And then a executor, or not executor, a somebody that was owed the deceased person money, okay, with the, word must have got out on the streets that someone passed away. They came forward and they put a lien on the house for what supposedly they had borrowed, the deceased person had borrowed from them, right? So had we got out of Dodge quick, sold the house, he wouldn't have had to pay all those mortgage payments. He wouldn't have had, that person, and there, that was like a whole thing. They didn't know 100% was it valid, was it not valid. But the guy, he went ahead and put the lien and he did all the processes to claim the money. So he ended up getting paid at closing, So had he just cut his losses, just put a nip in the butt, sell it as is, don't invest any money into it. Just sell it as quick as possible, liquidate it, let it be secure in your attorney's escrow account is the best way to go, in my opinion,
Hmm.
from all the cases I've seen.
Yeah, that could get real ugly real fast. So
Yes,
just, I'm curious. So if somebody has a house they've inherited and they have
right.
all the utilities, you touched on if it's not on auto pay, how is the electricity and the water and things being paid? If you don't have, like, say I'm the personal representative and I don't have the money to invest, how are those things gonna get paid? And is it gonna just go onto a bill? And what happens then?
Gets shut off.
That stinks, right?
Past due balance, final notice.
Right?
Yeah, so that's what happens, the executor doesn't have money themselves to pay it, and
Hmm.
they're locked out of the deceased person's bank accounts and they don't have access, then that's how real estate can become very quickly a distressed asset. And when I got into this originally, I really was working more with investors. So, like these properties that I was finding, the investors were purchasing them. And that
Hmm.
was great. And I loved it because it was like totally different for me. I was working with investors. They only cared about the numbers. If the numbers made sense, they were happy. Like traditional real estate, you're dealing with, like all the emotions of the buyer, the sellers, and the husbands and wives, right? But in investors, it's all about money. It's all
Hmm.
about numbers. There's no emotion, So as I started making that transition from traditional real estate more into a different type of real estate, that was what I saw. I was like, wow, I really like this. As I continued to work with the investors more and more, then I started realizing, okay, wait a minute. Um, this lady told me that she wants 150,000 for her house. I just did the research, as is the house is worth 300,000. So that's when I started saying, wow, this is not right, you know? Yes, my investors are happy, sure as hell happy, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But you know, me sitting in that situation, I didn't feel morally right that I wasn't sharing the information with this executor, right? And so then my business transitioned more into, instead of just serving the investors, is now changing to serve the executor. Because what happens is all these problems that we talked about, you know, cleaning out the house, nobody has money to pay the bills, you know, court process, legal, beneficiaries fighting. What does that leave you open to? Yeah, cash offer, quick sale. So these families are highly um you know, attracted to investors that say, hey, I'll give you a cash offer for your house, you know, I'll give you a cash offer for your house. Now in some scenarios that makes sense, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but what I found is that there was no realtors really servicing this demographic, right? So the only option that families really had was to sell their houses to these investors, right? Otherwise, they would have to have had all their stuff together, the house cleaned out, the house perfect, you know, because that's what a traditional realtor does. I don't clean out the house. I'm not dealing with your family drama. I don't know the probate law. You know, once you figure all that out, then I can be the realtor that will sell your house, right? So that's where I saw that unique opportunity for me to kind of slide in there and say, you know what? I can help you overcome all these things so that you don't have to sell your house for 50% of what it's actually worth, right? And then that's where Probate Property Angels really was born. And we're able to service people on the retail level. Like if you look at any of our listings that we market or we sell, they don't look distressed. You know, they don't look like, you know, ransacked. When I go to a house, it looks like, you know, like nobody did the laundry, nobody did this and that. Somebody went through the closet and was looking for the diamond rings, you know. Our houses look presentable. They've been restored, you know, they've been cleaned up, they've been prepared for sale, right? And so now the family can actually present it to the market as a regular transaction that's happening in the marketplace, you know? Now,
Mm-hmm.
your attorney's not going to do that, right? Your attorney's not going to help you through that process, okay? And you can outsource all these individual people, right? Like I can get like a cleaning service, then I can get an estate sale, then I can get a handyman, then I, you know, but again, then there goes the executor having to manage so many things that they end up crashing and burning half the time, you know. Whereas you work with Probate Property Angels from beginning to end, we take care of the whole process. So it lightens the load off of them, and then they're able to sell their property for fair market value, get it done while they're still in probate. So they don't have to wait till probate's finalized. We can get
Yeah,
it
so
done.
touch on that because so often we do hear attorneys say, "Oh, you can't sell, you know, can't sell during the probate process." But
Mm-hmm.
there's a little secret that you can.
It's a secret. And in Florida, you can request the court petition to sell the property in the best interest of the estate. So you just share with the judge what the situations are. You know, there's no the estate is insolvent. There's no money to pay the bills, judge. Can't even turn the power on, you know? Approved, right? There's a reverse mortgage on this property and the bill's going up every single month. Approved. There's a regular mortgage on this property and the family doesn't have access to the funds and the bank will not accept any payments from anybody else except the deceased person. Approved, right? So any circumstance that we've had states where, you know, the family's not local, the house is vacant, it's being subject to vandalism, things like that. approved. It's not very hard to get the judge to approve. It just has to be in the best interest of the estate. And the only, maybe if you were to say downfall, which I don't see as a big downfall, but the only difference of doing the authorization to sell instead of waiting until after probate is finalized is that you don't get the funds that day. But if you have to wait till probate's finalized anyways, you're not going to get the funds anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we like to work alongside that probate process. So if a standard probate without a lot of drama is, let's say, on average, 4 to 6 months, let's just say. We will work with the family, prepare the property for sale, deal with the contents that are inside of the home, present it for the market, get it on the market, right? Find a buyer, 30 days to a closing, right? So while the probate is doing its thing and it has its 90-day creditor periods and stuff like that, we're on the sidelines working right alongside that same process. But we're securing it, we're preparing the home, we're securing a buyer, we're getting the funds liquidated and safely in the account. And then once probate's done, then the attorney will disperse out to all the heirs accordingly.
Yeah, it just speeds up the process so much, and I don't think people realize that they can be done simultaneously. And I think that that more people need to know that it can be done, so that when probate's done, here's your money. You don't have
That's
to
it.
then say, okay, probate's done, now let's sell the house. No, they can be done together. And I really want to drive that home, because I think people are told no, they can't.
Or the attorneys simply don't discuss it with them,
That too.
right? Yeah, because attorney's perspective, they're just transferring the asset from the
Mhm.
deceased person's name to the heirs. That's their
Right,
job. That's what
right.
probate is. It's just the
Mhm.
transfer of the asset, you know? They're not asking, what do you want to do with this asset? What are your goals? How do you want to handle this? So a lot of times if you don't bring it up as the executor, like, hey, we want to sell this house, they're typically not going to bring it up.
Mhm.
They're just going to get the property into you and your brothers and sisters' names. And that's another thing. I mean, I know we have only a couple minutes here, but that's another topic is, do you really want to own a property with your brothers and sisters? Because once you go through the probate process, then what actually happens? Let's say you don't sell, you don't do the authorization. At the end of probate, you're now going to be the owner of you and maybe 5 beneficiaries. Well, guess what happens now? All 5 of you, who's paying the taxes? Who's paying the utilities? Who's mowing the grass? Who's looking after this? Oh, you want to rent it? Okay, so who's now going to be the landlord? Who's the one doing the repairs? Who's the one, right? And
Yeah.
so even regular real estate business partners can get hairy. What do you think about managing a property with your brothers and sisters? You know?
Who may or may not be getting along.
Yes, and from what I see working with so many families is normally there's like kind of like a leader, there's kind of somebody that's organized, somebody that, gets things done, and they overcompensate for the other family
Right.
members that aren't maybe as quick on their toes, maybe they don't have the same bank account, they don't have the same resources, and then there can start that bitterness, right? Of like, I'm doing all this and you're doing nothing. And, so I always tell brothers and sisters, I'm like, listen, if you guys want to do a rental property, let's do this. Let's liquidate this asset, okay? Put it into a trust. Then you guys go out and buy a performing product in the marketplace that is going to be a rental,
Mhm.
okay? Have a trust agreement in place, okay? So it says who's doing this, who's doing that, in the event that one of you dies, like if 3 people inherit a property and one person passes away, now that share is now going to go to all their children, right? Where
Mhm.
it should be, if the 3 of us inherited the property, one person passes away, it should just double up our portions. But that's not what happens. It gets spread out to, are your nieces and nephews all ready to get going here? So it gets slicey and dicey. And so that's why I say, like, If you get the property put in your name, now you've just inherited it with, now you own it with five of your brothers and sisters. Typically not a good idea.
I can see the value of just selling it in the process.
Selling it. And hey, if you guys want to get into a business deal together, let
Yeah.
that be separate, but don't do it as part of your family's estate. Unless you guys are going to do it the right way, you're going to set up a trust. You're going to say, hey, if one of us dies, this is what happens to it. When
Hmm.
the rent comes in, we're going to hold it in this trust account and it's just going to build up. Nobody's going to get the money, like there's ways that you can do it, and I've worked with families on how to do that process, but for the most part, most families are not really, someone just passed away and now you're just trying to administer it. You didn't just start an investment seminar, like now you're all of a sudden going to be this investor that has apartments for rent. Um, but these are the dreams, the thoughts that go through people's minds, when they are
Yeah.
having these opportunities. And it's important. I walk down all thought processes with families, and show them, the pros and the cons of each direction.
Yeah.
Um, because they have to make some hard decisions, on how things are going to be handled. But did we do it, Holly?
I think we did.
Yay! Okay, well, I'm so glad Probate Property Angels got to shine our light on the death care industry and see how important we are in the process and how we help families. And thank you, Holly, for being a great interviewer.
I did my best. You're right. It's not hard with you.
Thank you.
All
All
right.
right, guys. Well, we'll see you on the next one.